Yeah, so really blessed to work with Kamana Publishing. Can't thank them enough for this work. You know, to be honest, I had other publishers that I was working with, university presses, and they all wanted me to write a book that was going to have such academic jargon language that wasn't going to be accessible to our people. And I knew that Kamana Publishing was the right place for me to work with because they're really committed to telling stories about people and getting the message out. So how to use our so today I'm just going to zoom in a little bit about this idea of Oiwi Optics and Hawaiian identity and what that says about our leadership. And, so this is kind of a backdrop. In a way, this is a metaphor to a lot of my work. Anybody recognize this map sort of in the background of this slide? It's done by S.P. Kalama, a Hawaiian cartographer, actually Hawaiian geographer, probably, I think about him, Samuel Kamakawa was like one of the fathers, maybe of Hawaiian history in his time. This guy is like the father of Hawaiian geography. He was amazing. His knowledge of place, of Amakua, the boundaries, the names, was just incredible. He was actually a surveyor in the kingdom. And the one who first produced this map. And you guys can see, right, it's Maui Island, Lanai, Molokai, Kaho'olawe, and it's color-coded. They were utilizing technology that was really at the forefront of its time. But you can see they're starting to represent our Moku division, Honua'ula, right, Kahikinui, and they even are demonstrating the relationships between these places. If you guys are familiar with the traditional poema on Maui, Honua'ula actually means Hulu's Kaho'olawe. So you see that color coding that's flowing through. Now, this is the Hawaiian map. This is the Hawaiian map. This is S.P. Kalama. And he actually was a note. He wrote the entire Buke Mahele. He was the guy. If you ever seen Buke Mahele, seen the handwriting, he was that same person. Now, take a look at that. Keep this map in your mind and contrast it with this slide. Yeah? Immediately, you can see same technology, right? Same technology, but different. 1838. This is before. The map appears, I believe, in 1793, somewhere along there, after Cook's voyage. But this is the first known map of what they call the Sandwich Islands, right? So you kind of take a look, and you can see how the technology was being utilized in a very different manner, right? You look at this map, our islands look empty. Yeah? The islands look empty. The place names aren't accurate. If anyone was to look at this map, you wouldn't have a sense that these islands have order, right? Or that they're people, that there's a lot of people on them. And believe it or not, S.P. Kalama's map was done with that intent. I mean, this is a huge map. It was like, I've seen it. There's a copy in the Royal Geographical Society in London. It's probably about this size. That's a huge scroll you got to roll out. It made its way to the U.S., to D.C., and also to London. So what Argentina were doing is saying, okay, never mind the earlier maps you saw of Hawaii, right? They looked empty and they didn't look like that order. But our islands are ordered, tremendously peopled, and here's a way of displaying it. And it doesn't matter, right? That's the beautiful thing about this technology. Pretty sure the guys in England couldn't figure out how to read our little Hawaii words. Right? It would have been challenged with that. But no matter what, at really almost intuitive level, you can see, okay, but there's something going on here. That these islands are ordered. And that's what they set out to do. So that's really a metaphor for a lot of the work that I do. But when I was in public school, born and raised here in Hawaii, I didn't learn this part of our history. The history that I learned said we began here, this discovery, right? This is when history started. And we kind of flip that, I think, in a very appropriate way for this conference. This was something that it took me about 6 months to figure out what was going on. But on this side of the page, it's a little hard to make out. It's actually a draft of organic act. So there's a piece of legislation that made Hawaii a territory. And this is the front of the page, page 157. Now somebody took this, flipped the page over, and there's about 200 documents. And they started to write down this really old mo'olelo about the history of our people, all Makou on the same paper that was a draft that was going to make us a territory. So this document was actually in the Colonialism collection. At least in my work, it's very possible that Colonialism himself, sitting in D.C., very frustrated with the politics and policies of the time, and took a break and decided he's going to write down some of our mo'olelo and language. And what part of this mo'olelo begins to discuss. Now we know the places where Kaulu was born, and also the places he visited prior to his return to Hawaii. Wapau, Loaiaya, na Aina Asia, Europa, Amena Mokupuni o Kamoana. In his travels, he exhausted the lands of Asia, Europe, and the islands of the Pacific. Kanana ana, o kololei ke ia, o iai, o ko kākou ali'i ke kahi, I ke maka ai, I ia mauaina. One can see that this is true since our ali'i were the ones who saw with their own eyes these lands. So, what this mo'olelo is suggesting, right, is not that Cook discovered us, and we know that never happened in 1778. We're already here. Can't discover people that are already there. What this mo'olelo is suggesting is actually, even prior to that, we were discovering Europe and Asia and sailing all around the Pacific, right? And bringing these things back with us. And then, the ali'i in the 19th century began to remember and recall this mo'olelo because when they go out to London, Asia, and other places, and they start to recall part of our history, our traditions is buried in here. So, to flip the history that I learned in public school as a youth on its head, this mo'olelo does it. The fact that it's written on the back of the bill that was going to make Hawaii a territory is incredible and ironic. But we all certainly know, right, that here's another attempt. 1842, Samuel Kamana starts to codify for the first time and take really what was ali'i knowledge, right? For a while, these genealogies that they were writing down in the newspaper in this time period was not known before, right? But for the first time, Kamana and others begin to put these cosmogonic genealogies, works, like Kumuhonua, later Whakawa guys bring back Kumalita, right? But this is really amazing because, so 1842, 1777, right? It's a little difficult to figure out how big our population was, but for sure, we're talking in the area of between 700,000 and 1 million people throughout all of our islands. On Hawaii Island alone, there was probably over 300,000 people. Today, on our island, we get about 170. Okay? To give you an idea of the context. But 1842, from maybe 1 million or 700,000, there are 80,000 Hawaiians. So 1, maybe 2 out of 20 people survive. But in the midst of that, right, guaranteed the hardest period ever in Hawaiian history, the most struggles that we ever faced, watching our people pass away alongside of us, they did this. Right? Kamana puts down this mo'olelo about the history of our people. And actually, when he doesn't just do it to say, here's Kamehameha. Right? Actually, when you read through the reason why he's putting it in, he says, this is for the Hanau Naho, this is for the generations to come. so that they know the true history of our island. Yeah. It's amazing. And so what did these genealogies begin to do? So they begin to tell us the chiefly ancestors shows the ancient Ali'i and the people of Hawaii. So it starts to remind us that we have a common ancestor. Right? We come from Hawaii. This is one of my favorite ones because me and my friends, all from the other islands, we always beef about which island is the best, right? But this one reminds us. Yeah, there we go. There we go. Onalili Oahu, ame Kauai, ame Hawaii, ame Maui, ame Molokai, Ho'okahi no Kupu. No matter what, all the chiefs, all the different islands, all our differences, hey, one ancestor. That's what and so, I mean, this is really, really important and significant. I would bet my house, okay, that when Herb Bingham and others were introducing reading and writing through the Bible and Christianity, they did not expect when Hawaiians began to write that they would not necessarily publish Genesis, but codify ancient traditions about Makou and genealogy. Right? So this is really important because it reflects a fundamental way of viewing and being in the world that's Kanaka. So it says, hey, not only does we have 117 generations that's linked to this place, but our Ali'i come from the origin of this world. Our people come from common ancestors. So it reflects a native Hawaiian perspective on the origin of people and place. Use the printed word to express ancient ways of being. Right? Again, a lot of this ike would not have been accessible had it not been for the technology of the time. And these people that had the ike decide, hey, we're going to put it in these ike. We're going to put it out there, and here we are, 2014, and I'm talking about it. So, yes.
Two histories going on. One written by the other side, and
Yeah.
one written by our side.
Yeah. Yes, I think simultaneous. Yeah, going, and then figuring out which one do we access. Yeah, and actually, we're gonna, I think, get to a point that shows us why maybe I never learned this in public school. Or coming now.
Sorry for that.
Okay, so we all know this man, right? Waikoloa Marriott, the third, some of the highlights of his reign. But this one really struck me when I first got to access these documents. So the U.S. Constitution, it's a beautiful document, it's fantastic. It's like a red carpet that goes walking all the way through it, behind bulletproof glass. Guaranteed 10,000 people go and look at it every day. And again, I was educated, born in this place, and I never saw or even knew that the Hawaiian Constitution existed until I was in my mid-20s. First time I ever accessed it. And it wasn't written in English, it was written in Hawaii. Right? And here's one of the highlights to me out of this Constitution that are amazing. And it's the same kind of theme. All of my work really is looking at how Hawaiians take new tools and make them Hawaiian. So Constitution, we never had that necessarily before, but we made them Hawaiian. Here's how they did it. This is the system that was put in order to regulate and order the lands. Kamana the first, Kamana the first, he's the po'o, right? He's the head of the government. And to him belong all the lands from Hawaii to Ni'ihau. This is the important part. But it didn't truthfully only belong to him. It also belonged to the Hawaiian people. So you can imagine this time period there. The Constitution is a source of law. It's a foundational document for the country. And they're figuring out how do we use this tool to put into place are older traditions of relating to each other through the land. Not everybody owns, not one person owns all the land. It's not like the one king. Hawaii, they're saying no. The king owns it, but actually the people and the chiefs also own it jointly. And another way of reflecting our older ways of relating to Ainu. So actually, if you're crazy enough to read my book, when I talk about the Mahele, I think actually the Mahele was almost trying to create a system that was going to provide land for our people in perpetuity. It was almost a little more socialistic, if you will, than we think about it today. But of course, a lot of things change after the overthrow. Okay, another great highlight of Kauike'oli's reign. I'll take a sip of water here. Is this document. We found this when went to London at the United Kingdom Archives, and it was pretty amazing. It took me longer to get through their security screening than it did to find this document. This was the very first thing I found when we were there, and incredibly important because it says, consider the Sandwich Isles as an independent state and never to take possession of either directly or under protectorate. And that word independent state, I mean, that's sort of like what made us a country. It's kind of like finding the Declaration of Independence or something in the United States, right? Really foundational document. And today we call it the Anglo-Franco Proclamation because it was joint recognition by both the French and the British governments. And a few years after I went to London, a good friend of mine, one of my grad students, I cannot speak French, he can. He went to the archives in France and he found almost a duplicate of this same document that's in the French National Archives as well. So this is a huge, very big deal. It became, like many of us in this room know, the reason for November 28th, Laku Oko'a, or Hawaiian Independence Day. And it was a big deal, celebrated in the kingdom. And here's an example. I think that flag one is going around the Aztec guys. They were recognizing 30 years of Hawaiian independence. But it's also a little bit of a tragic story. How this takes place is originally two envoys are sent out, Timoteo Hatlilio and William Richards. And there's all these amazing stories about Timoteo Hatlilio riding on the back of a donkey through Mexico and up to the U.S. But, eventually he battles with tuberculosis and getting sick back and forth the whole time. And eventually he passes away on his way back home. And he does actually, live to see the Hawaiian Kingdom be recognized as an independent sovereign state. Even William Richards, a guy that came as a missionary, ended up really a Hawaiian patriot. Even he says how big of a deal it was that they got recognition as an independent state. But Hatlilio passes away, and this was documented in the Lupiko Hawaii. E kaua ho'olohe me ka ho'omanawa nui no ka mo'i Kauike'oli. Ua ku ka uhi I loko ka hau'oli no ka pono ka aina ka hana ho'i hiki ole ai ki ho'opoina ia no ka nui o kona aloha I kona ali'i ka aina a me ka lahui. One translation. Ha'alilio was an attendant who listened with patience to mo'i Kauike'oli. The veil was released in joy, and the good for the land, a deed that shall never be forgotten, because of the greatness of his love for his ali'i, his land, and his country. Believe it or not, I read through the journal of William Richards, and the day that Hatlilio was passing away, he called Richards in, and he told him two things. Tell the king, I'm sorry, I didn't make it back, and I couldn't see him, and ask him to take care of my mother. So two things he asked for on his deathbed. And again, what a powerful story for our people. What an amazing story, and something that Kuleana, yeah, I mean everything is there. Giving, right? giving of yourself, being selfless, servant leadership. Everything is wrapped up in there. And what an opportunity for us to put this back into our history books, because again, I've never learned this stuff when I was going to school here. So the kingdom becomes this incredible vessel. I mean, they get recognized as being an independent sovereign state. And I think it might be easy to sort of overlook the importance of this, but you know, at this time period, this was nothing short of remarkable. The Hawaiian Kingdom was the first non-colonized, non-European independent state in the world. You know, other people, there's even English language newspapers going, what? How does this little place in the Pacific become independent? How did that work, right? But they utilize that. So it doesn't necessarily mean just because you're recognized as a country that now you're equal and you're going to run up and, you know, knock America in the chin and think you can take them out. But it does mean that you have a seat at the table. Right? I mean, now we at least have a seat at the table and we can negotiate, even not necessarily as military equals, but as legal equals. And so here's another stunning example of that. This was another document we found when we were in London. And this one was a petition to the British government to end sort of this period when Britain was occupying Hawaii for about 6 months. We celebrated right at Thomas Square and call it the Fall Affair and all these things. But this was the actual petition that made its way all the way to Britain. And what I didn't know when I saw this document, when I was going through it, I had no idea. Not only did they send a protest in the most perfect legal English that you could write, right, at the time period, but this one on the right-hand side is a Olel Hawaii version. So imagine there's my wife and her sister. We're sitting in London, feeling very far away from home, and I come across this petition, Makou Hawaii, to Queen Victoria. And I'm going, wow, how can? How? Why? Why would they send one? Victoria cannot read Olel Hawaii. But it's a statement. It's a statement to the world to say, hey, we're on par with any other place that exists. And I know English, legal language, perfect, but we want to say them in our language as well. We need to recognize that. And it was another thing that really moved me. To be honest, I cried. I cried when I read it. Yeah. It really caught me by surprise. So, you know, as I was doing my work and my research, what I started to come to the conclusion was that our people were a lot smarter than I was giving them credit for, and a lot smarter than I thought other authors were giving them credit for. And so I really began to struggle with that and try to figure out, well, man, I thought the missionaries kind of made them feel inferior and silly, right? And they just were duped and tricked. And so I really started to press on that idea. What I came to the conclusion was that actually, no, our elite they're pretty top-notch people. You know, maybe hard to say who's the best, but definitely hard to beat, right? Amazing people. And in fact, they never saw themselves as inferior to Westerners. And this is one of the more really powerful but also enlightening examples of that to me through the elite's own words. So this takes place in the midst of a trip, a diplomatic trip. This is Judd, and this is Alexander Liholiho and Lota Kapaiwa, who eventually become Kamehameha the Fourth and the Fifth. And so I believe Alexander Liholiho is about 15 years old at this time. Lota, I want to say he's 17 and maybe turned 18 on the trip, or something like that. But fairly young. You know, they had been in the Chief's Children's School. They had seen diplomats come to Hawaii back and forth, but they never traveled away to foreign lands before. And it's really an amazing story because while they're in France, there's these really cool stories. You know, Lota Kapaiwa, he's one big brother, man. And I wouldn't want to, get on his bad side. But he actually took fencing in France. He's taking fencing lessons, right? Imagine him, fencing lessons and taking French lessons. They visit the Louvre. Alexander Leo sits on the throne of Napoleon. When they're in England, they visit Windsor Castle, meet with Prince Albert, right? I mean, go to all these operas. They really wine and dine with, this really elite class of the world at the time that they found a way to access. But they start to form real strong concepts about how countries are different and how cultures are different in countries. And so after all of that, they go to a party put on by President Tyler at the time, the U.S. President of the United States. They have a big shindig, get down, and then they're going to get on a train from D.C. to New York. And something really amazing happens. So Alexander Leo is sitting next to Judd when he's approached by someone on the train. And the person on the train approaches him pretty aggressively and tells him, hey, you're not supposed to be up here in this class. Right? Get back there with the servants. And here's how Alexander Leo responds. I took hold of his arm and asked him his reasons and what right he had in turning me out and talking to me in the way that he did. He replied he had some reasons, but requested me to keep my seat. And I followed him out, but he took care to be out of my way after that. I found that he was the conductor and probably had taken me for somebody's servant just because I had darker skin than he had. Confounded fool. And then he goes on to say, here I state I am disappointed at the Americans. They have no manners, no politeness, not even common civilities to a stranger. And not only in this case, but almost everybody that one meets in traveling the United States are saucy. Saucy. His brother, Latukapuaiva, also doesn't take on a real strong affiliation with Americans. He says in his journal, they're great people, the Americans, always picking others' business but their own.
He knew that.
Previous slide,
Yes,
where'd you find these?
these quotes.
The quotes.
The quotes, yeah. So both of these quotes, the Kekiali at the time, these young chiefs, took journals. They had personal journals that they kept with them, that they handwrote. So I read through all their personal journals while they're going on this trip. And it's really, I mean, I'm just touching the surface how fascinating it is. Like, it's very clear, Alexander Leo in particular, the man has got a fantastic brain for mathematics. Like at one point they come across, they're in France, and they come across, these kind of like, I don't know, these circus shows, and they got like a giant there. And Alexander's fascinated because he said, the guy was, and he starts to break down mathematically how tall he was, and we measured his arm was twice the length of this and this and this, and yeah, so there's all these really fascinating things that are in their journals. Wow. And they're only teenagers, they're only teenagers, but this journey becomes fundamental towards developing their politics, and it comes out when they become mo'i, as kings themselves. So it's no surprise that when both of these men ruled Hawaii, there was no thought of American annexation. I mean, they buried that really deep, and Hawaii was going to stay independent. And then we have other examples where, many of us know this one, Kalakawa's voyage, right? Essentially around the globe, first head of state to take on such a venture to try to travel the world. And this is another thing about the two converging histories, right? If you read the Pacific Commercial Advertiser, and their accounts of this and their characterizations of Kalakaua, which was an English language newspaper, there's the ones calling him the spendthrift, merry monarch, gambling drunkard, right? He's just blowing all our money. And maybe parts of it is true, but actually I see Kalakaua, he was actually a visionary. Kalakaua was trying to find a way to figure out how this small little place in the Pacific can survive, right, in perpetuity. And he went around the globe to create relationships with leaders from other parts of the world to maintain Hawaii's independence. And this part is really amazing too. So he goes to Japan, China, Siam, Singapore, India, Egypt, Italy, England, Belgium, Austria, Spain, Portugal, thank God, no. Portugal, France, and the United States. Well, I say thank God because in Portugal he negotiated the treaty with the Portuguese, which is how many of my Portuguese ancestors came here, right? From the Azores, right? Okay, so this is really significant because other ali'i went out, from Liolio, from Kamehameha II, we have a tradition of going out in the world and trying to develop diplomatic relationships with other countries. But no one ever went to non-European countries before Kalakaua. And I think this is really significant because Kalakaua could see how the European powers were taking up and carving up the world. So he thinks in his mind, well, I'm going to go meet with these Japanese, right? And see how are they dealing with these imperial threats, right? And another reason why I put this up, so, if you're like me and maybe not that educated as a youth, and you saw the picture of Kalakaua and you thought, wow, isn't this Hawaiian interesting, right? Look at him, he's wearing this coat, and he's got these medallions and all these things, and is he trying to be European? Is that what he's trying to do? And then you go look at the picture of Emperor Meiji.
Same thing.
And what is he doing? Yeah, same thing, right? So it's really a demonstration of what leadership looked like in this century, right? If you're a non-European person trying to carve out a future for your country, just like Japan was, look at how he dresses. And this is an amazing part of the story. So Kalakaua, they get on the ship, they actually go to San Francisco first, and then they make their way to Japan. And as they're getting in to Edo or Tokyo Harbor Bay, there's all these ships from all over the world. And Kalakaua gets this idea, yeah, I'm going to throw up the Hawaiian flag and the royal standard so they know that the head of state is on the ship. And some of the advisors he had on the ship said, oh, bro, don't get over yourself a little bit here. We're in Japan. We don't know if anyone's going to recognize this flag, and it might be embarrassing for us. And Kalakaua is staunch. No. Raise the flag. They raise the flag. Within about 7 minutes, royal salutes start firing from the cannons that are all in the boat. Wow. Boom, 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 boom. Hawaiian flag. Put them up on the gas. When they get off, and they actually get off the ship to land for the first time in Japan, they're met by the counterpart, the equivalent of the Royal Hawaiian Band, the Royal Japanese Band, if you can call it that. And guess what? The first song that they play is Hawaii Poli.
Wow.
And they're brought to tears, honestly. They say they're brought to tears. They didn't expect that kind of recognition to take place. So it becomes a very impactful journey for Kalakaua, and this meeting in particular. Kalakaua, in talking with Emperor Meiji, they talk about the divine origin of rulers, right? That's something that was unique for Japan and Hawaii, is that, the emperor was the embodiment of God, right? That's sort of like, if you think about our Kumohonua and earlier traditions, that's kind of how Hawaiians thought of ali'i, right? And so they connect on that level. Kalakaua is fascinated. He visits Buddhist temples and he becomes really fascinated in Buddhism. He even starts to have conversations about having Buddhist missionaries come into Hawaii. Obviously that didn't take place, but he's fascinated with this other religion. And again, two non-European rulers dealing with very similar challenges in this period of history. And but Kalakaua was incredibly progressive, and I think that's why the English language newspapers tore it down so much, is because he was a not in the box kind of leader. He was going to go out there and do it, And so he, being with the kind of foresight that he had, he proposed this idea of a Pan-Pacific Federation. This federation between Hawaii and Japan to say, hey, look, if we somehow can band together and get other places in the Pacific, then maybe we can ward off these larger imperial powers. And it also is true, many of you probably have heard that he was attempting to see if there could be some type of union between Princess Kaiulani and the Japanese monarchy. So a similar thing happens when Klakao was in Siam. Siam is a place, we know it's Thailand today, but the unique thing, Siam, just like Japan, just like Hawaii, is one of these rare places in the world that was native ruled that became recognized as a country. It sort of fended off colonialism, right? And again, go look at how this guy dresses. Rama the First, right? Similar styles of dress to Klakaua. They go on a crazy expedition. I want to say they hunt on the back of elephants and all kind of amazing stuff there in Thailand. But Klakao was really struck by how similar the geography is in a way, right? The coconut trees, right? The weather patterns look similar, and so that feels kind of, in a way, kind of like home to Klakaua. King Rama really comments to Klakaua, asks him, "How did you get such a good command of English, in the English language?" Because at this time, he was also getting foreign advisors that could speak English to come and to teach, his circle, right? But Klakaua's English was really, he had great command and was superior, and so he actually was impressed by that. And I guess another one of the real significant things is in the history of the country of Thailand, this king is really seen as the great king because he's the one that figures out how to engage with the outside world, to modernize and to protect them from being colonized. So Klakaua meets some really important people on his way there, not just the Portuguese. No. Okay, so when he returns home, it's really no surprise that, to me, he really begins the very public promotion of Oiwi heritage and metaphysics. Right? We know this through his coronation, where he has 24 hours of hula, Oli and Mele performed really out open in the public in a way that hadn't been done in the kingdom in a long time. And he brings back also this Halinawa, right? Which was really a society, an entity to further Hawaiian knowledge system and to identify, genealogies and ways of seeing and being in the world. So, I mean, he comes back. I think he's fearless, right, from this voyage. And now he begins to push in ways that really, I mean, arguably, I don't think anyone else in the world had attempted to do this one. So because the kingdom was recognized as an independent sovereign state and had a seat at the table with those other countries, right? Not necessarily militarily equal, but legally equal. When Klakaua gets word that Germany and America are sort of in a catfight over who's going to colonize some more first, right? Who's going to take over some more. Klakaua actually sends a formal protest to all of those countries that were involved, not just Germany and the U.S., but he sent it to the UK and several other, basically all the independent sovereign states at the time. And this is a section of what the protest has to say. His Hawaiian Majesty's government, so happily prospering through national independence, makes an earnest appeal to the governments of the great and enlightened states that they will recognize the inalienable rights of several native communities of Polynesia to enjoy opportunities for progress and self-government, and will guarantee to them some favorable political opportunities which have made Hawaii prosperous and happy. So he actually says, okay, and he's the only guy, only another country could do this at the time, right? And he's at that level, and he says, okay, well, we're going to throw it on them and say, hey, why do you guys need to carve out the Pacific? Leave them alone. Let them have a chance to be independent, like Hawaii. And this was substantial. It's not written about too much in history books, but I found a document in the London archives that was in the classified section at the time, where they're pissed. The leaders of the countries are like, who is these Hawaiians telling us we can't take out the Pacific? Who do they think they are? They're getting way over themselves, right? But Klakaua was pushing on that level. And so, to give you guys an idea of the level of diplomatic prowess that the kingdom achieved and these elite had, I'm just going to fly through some of the treaties that were put in place during this time period. So the Austria-Hungary Treaty, the Belgian Treaty, the Bremen Treaty, the Danish Treaty, the French Treaty, the German Treaty, the British Treaty, Hamburg Treaty, Italian treaty, Japanese treaty. This was the first one that Japan had entered into after a period of isolation. Dutch treaty, Portuguese treaty, Russian treaty, Samoan treaty, Spanish treaty, Swiss treaty, Swedish Norwegian treaty, and American treaty. And so we kind of know that, you know, the kingdom was really established diplomatically and was recognized as an independent sovereign state, and that's really unarguable from these documents. And it's really cool too. If you go to the Hawaii State Archives, they'll tell you, you know, from their perspective, Hawaii is the only state that has a treaty, multiple treaties that are housed in its archives, because we're the only place that that had that kind of diplomatic recognition. So you can actually still see these treaties in the archives, and almost every year when I bring my students in, I have them take a look at a few of these, and they get really moved. And then, you know, we know, right, about the overthrow and the U.S. involvement, and then our kupuna's sort of attempts at trying to resist annexation through legal means, and the work that Wainoi Silva and others uncovered with annexation petitions. Really amazing and fantastic part of our history that's kind of re-emerging and understanding, again, the diplomatic prowess of our people at the time. You know, the overthrow, and I think the ramifications, I'm only, you know, again, I'm young, and I know you guys, many of you have been at this longer than me, but I'm only beginning to recognize how much this hurt and iha and that stains almost everything we do in Hawaii. If you work for Kamehameha, I don't work for Kamehameha anymore, but I would argue, even if you work for Kamehameha and you go out into the community, that kind of level of distrust and hurt, everything that you face, it's all bound up in this deep, complex iha. You know what I mean? And it stains almost everything we try to do. And this is what it looks like, right? This is what it looks like. This is, at least when I first saw this photo, and I thought, wow, look at the kind of militarism that existed in Hawaii after the overthrow during this time period. I mean, it's uncomfortable to see sandbags with a cannon behind the walls of Iolani Palace. And right outside on this side was a whole other set of sandbags, and eventually they set up sharpshooters on the tops of towers. It was a very deep, dark, black time. And after the overthrow, you know, there's sets of policies that really begin to, I think, at least when I look at our history, are the reasons why I didn't know we had a constitution written in Makou, Hawaii, or I didn't know we had a bilingual legislature, and incredible, intense debates, Makou, Hawaii, about how we pass law, right? Because after the overthrow, Lauren Thurston removes Olelo as a qualification to be a representative, to run for representative. And eventually, in 1896, we all, you know, learned that Olelo Hawaii was removed from teaching in public schools, right? So starts this period of what I call full colonialism. It's like they're trying to pretend we weren't a country, really trying to denationalize us and strip us of our national identity, but pretend like we're a colony and make it look like that. So how do you do that? You strip them of their language. And then after you strip them of their language, you know, it's really critical. If you're existing behind sandbags at Iolani Palace, you need to get new people here, right? That don't have the same type of national sentiment as the ones that were here. And this is a quote from Sanford Dole. And he's really clear, right? So they confiscate the crown and the government lands, they throw them together, they call them the public lands, which is also a pretty sly maneuver, yeah? So now, anytime someone comes to Hawaii and, you know, why are these Hawaiians concerned with complaining about the public lands? It's public. It belongs to everybody, right? It's public. But that was a strategic maneuver, is to take the word government and crown lands and combine them together and give them a new name. But Dole is really clear when he says, in order to develop a citizenship here in Hawaii that will always be improving in those characteristics which are recognized as the highest attributes of American citizenship, it is essential that the class referred to as Anglo-Saxon should be largely increased, and particularly that it should be increased by the introduction of persons from the mainland. it's the first time I've seen that word mainland, who have acquired long residence, and particularly by inheritance and position, the qualities of citizenship above referred to.
What year?
This was a, shoot, I have to go back. He's reflecting back on passing these laws, so this is probably like 1906 or 1905, somewhere in there. This is when they're getting questions during the midst of the territory as to how were you guys managing the land, what was the purpose of the Land Act, and sort of responding to some of those questions. And you know, actually, it's not as successful as they wanted it to be immediately. Parts of the Land Act kind of failed, but parts of it are successful. But this one kind of blew me away, and I got it actually from an article that Uncle's son, Keanusai, had published, looking at the demographics of the Hawaiian national population. So, in 1890, there was about 2,000 Americans that were in Hawaii. Roughly 2% of the alien population. The Hawaiian national population was 40,000, out of a total national population of about 48,000. And then by 1950, it just explodes, right? Close to 375, close to 400,000 Americans that had migrated into the country. So in a span of 60 years, what our kupuna saw happen around them was a massive influx, right, and a change in demographics. And you can see how that would change. Now Hawaiians, 20% of the population, your voting issues, your representation, all of these things would shift, right, with that influx and change in population. So I think for me, those are the policies that were really implemented that somewhat effective in obliterating, you know, Hawaiian national consciousness and a lot of our history. But the beauty of it is that you know, we're all still here, and we're all struggling through these issues, and not that we always agree or ever will or ever did, but we're engaged again and we're active and we're talking about these things. And this is you know, something that, a quote that really kind of blew me away. Some of you were I'm sure there and around in this time period, but the first thing that I found that almost speaks to the reemergence of a national consciousness, and I'm just going to read a little bit kind of for you guys here. So this is George Helm, yeah? And he says, it is the seed today of a new revolution. We're not talking about the kind that the pilgrims came over here, run away from England, go wipe out the Indians, you know, call this America and celebrate 200 years with firecrackers. But the kind of revolution we're talking about is one of consciousness. Consciousness, awareness, facts, figures. And like Walter said, we're going to Iolani Palace to make our ho'okupu to our kupuna, our ali'i. And we hope to put somebody back in there. And we're serious. We gotta think this way, we gotta talk that way. Because that's the only facts that allow for change. And change is synonymous with revolution. Revolution comes from the word revolving, turning in and out, so you have something better to live with. And so, to me, when I read that and I thought about all the work that I do, and I think, oh, this was this time period. How do we get our facts back? Right? We understand ourselves and our history and who we are. And so I just want to humor me if you can. I just want to read to you the end of my book, and then I have a set of questions, and we can just kind of go around and talk story. What will happen? What will happen when we, as Oiwi, value our own perspectives and experiences enough to follow and finish what our kupuna put in motion? What will happen when we more fully trust in our ancestral memory? What will happen when we realize that our agency is still intact and that the final outcome of the American occupation in Hawaii is yet to be determined? This book has described the agency and resilience of Hawaiian ali'i. It's offered glimpses into the collective past
calling attention to the accomplishments of the ancestors and acknowledging their courage and resourcefulness in the face of extreme difficulty. The name of this book, No Makou Kamana, suggests that the power is within each of us to carve out our future. It is a strength inherited from the ancestors that grounds, challenges, and inspires, ever present and never to be forgotten. As the famed line of the song Kamanamaikalani reminds us, "Walava Makou wikapohaku." As long as there is stone in the islands, we will endure. This book is a mo'olelo, a story framed by my design and carefully revealed in each successive section. The story is a joyous one, but not one without its share of sorrow. There is much to learn from this mo'olelo, and I'm confident that the next generation will expand and improve on what I've shared. For Oiwi, this book strives to be a testament to the brilliance of our native rulers. Much may be gained by freeing their spirits from the chains of victimhood as the prey of foreigners. Ali'i were astute leaders. Their dedication to their people and their nation should not be overlooked because of their inability to stop brute military force. Understanding and accepting the ways that they were changing while still being Hawaiian directly speaks to the heart of many Oiwi as we face contemporary struggles on a daily basis. Reclaiming our past as we navigate toward our future can only lead to more clarity, direction, and resolve in the midst of change. Witnessing what our ancestors were able to do against such overwhelming odds should help to defeat the seeds of self-doubt that have afflicted our people for too long. For the world, this book offers an anomaly. A native-ruled country that was never colonized became a multi-ethnic nation, fully functioning as a bilingual state until overthrown and occupied by the United States. But this is not simply another story of native lands and identity claimed by a belligerent and arrogant empire. Rather, it is an account that reveals the enduring agency of a people in the center of the Pacific, never to acquiesce and never to lose aloha. Our struggle builds resolve, and we will remain. Makou Kamana. So, I think we have a little bit more time, and if we just want to go around and talk story now, I'm always nervous about how much documents to put up and how much not, and it's hard to judge your audience and everything. Hopefully, you guys got a sense of the work and try to recover. Yes.
What's next?
For me or for us? For me?
For you and us.
When I did this work, this whole thing was a journey for me. As a Kanaka. In the midst of this, I saw my grandmother get, triple bypass heart surgery. I spent every day with her at the hospital for 3 months. I saw her recover, struggle with diabetes, and then I saw my wife later after my grandma passed with cancer. And so these mo'olelo to me aren't, they're real. The idea that we can and we have power in the midst of challenges, we can do it. So that's what I hope the book does for people in some fashion, like seeing these letters and the works of the elite and seeing their courage, and knowing that a sense of that, a part of that, we can do too. And yeah, at an individual level, I mentor incredible students, and there's a powerful generation that's emerging. I don't even know if they're going to read my whole book, because what they do is they go find the images, and then I see them flying over Facebook, warp speed. But what it does is, they're getting a part of our history, right? In a way. So I don't know. That's my answer. I cannot individually, I don't. When you're drinking beer or wine with me at home, I can tell you my political position. But
I think that I haven't finished your book yet, but one of the most influential things as an educator, that and Mama was in my division, continuing ed Beamer, is that we have to rethink how we teach our children education and to move away from a grade level mentality of K-12. And then maybe take a look at, Ba'oakua, start bringing back the methodology of thinking indigenous from literally cosmogony for our children, and then the spirituality comes right through. But I think where you're going to influence me on Ahapua'a is the importance of looking at Ahapua'a as resource management in its totality, and how important it is to balance everything in the Ahapua'a. So I just want to thank you.
Yeah, no,
Thank you so much.
I think, one thing for me in education is, judging from this history and who we were, I have a real hard time thinking that success means we achieve on par standards with maybe oppressed people on the American continent. That's not even close to good for me. And so things like that, changing what we expect of our students and our people, and that's the only way, to me, that's the only way we can get better, is striving for the best, and then we're going to fall short sometimes. But if we don't think that they're capable and can achieve things on this level, on this part, if I was 14 years old and when, I don't want to share too much, but when I was in public school, the history that they taught me was, Cook came, the Hawaiians stole from him, they stole all the iron and the metal, right? And it wasn't because they were bad people, it's because they stole from each other all the time. That's why. And if you were to flip that with looking at the Hawaiian Constitution, looking at the Journal of Alexander Violico, and seeing what the people did, the standard goes way up.
Do you still feel
Yeah, when I read some of it, it's really hard. Some of it still hurts me, but I also mahalo that negativity in a way, because this might sound strange, but so I wouldn't wish it on anyone, but my wife was diagnosed with cancer when she's 8 months pregnant. And we had this incredible, difficult journey. She's healthy, now we have a new son. But
awesome.
That period made me so strong that now it's like a different person. So in a way, these kind of adversities that we face on a broader collective level, they can make us some pretty strong people when we can stand up.
What I find amazing is that, like I went to Kamanamaikalani too, and we were not taught any of this history. And how years later, we were able to find it. Why did they not destroy it? That's what amazes me, because they could have just wiped it out.
Wiped out the history.
Yeah, I do. I wondered that at times too when I was reading through the stuff. I said, wow, I can't believe they kept this around, because it really shows how bad it was, for people. But I do know, like my teacher used to tell me how she struggled as an educator at Kamana to bring things Hawaiian back. And then there's another level, right, is the language. Because so many of our people weren't fluent in the educational spheres back then, you only are accessing the English text. And the story is a convergent view of history. But now that we're getting back and seeing these, it's speaking to something that's here, that we know already, right? But it's powerful, and that's not going to change. That's not going to change. So that's why the future of Hawaii is going to be very, very different. I don't think the pendulum is swinging in the opposite direction. And so that makes me real hopeful.
Your book gave me a lot of hope.
Oh, Muhammad.
Yeah, it really did. Because sometimes when you're in the movement and you're an activist and you're labeled so many different things, you get discouraged, your heart just breaks. And then when you read and have evidence in your hand you know that the kuleana that was given to you was real and is real. You know, and so you take another step and you try again another day. My belief is, as long as get one of us breathing, we can fight.
We can handle.
We can handle. I just thank you for your work. You know, you get this age, and you can find it for years. To read this from young one, it's a blessing that you know you never waste your life fighting this. And we're getting old, and we're getting tired, and we need young ones like you to carry our paddles. That's why I thank you for this.
So basically, you studied the political evolution of our what was just said. Do you think that the prohibition of our language and basically the Americanization of students at Columbia was a necessary evil to where we are today?
Get us where we are today? Probably, but we're not in a good place today.
Yeah, but a wise man once said, addressing the law school students,
Yeah.
nobody ever told you it was going to be easy.
Yeah.
A law is never permanent.
Yeah.
Whoever told you everything's stagnant,
Yeah.
you always going to be. As long as the world is, as long as we're part of the global community, you're always going to have challenges. That's Hawaiian, and we're always going to have to defend or whatever, that's a better word, who we are. So, everybody's definition of where we're going is not the same.
And shouldn't be.
And it's not only activists that are labeled. It's those that we don't agree with within our own Hawaiian community. We all have to look at that too as Hawaiians. How do we treat each other as we go forward? How do we treat each other in the dialogue? Right?
Yeah.
That's just as important. And one thing you said, our elite was always felt equal. They never felt inferior. We are sovereign to sovereign. So, you know, it's getting to that place where we're not victims, we're not subservient to anybody. We are equal.
Yeah.
I don't think we're there.
Well, I think we're beyond that, to tell you the truth, because Hawaii has aloha, which the rest of the world needs. I mean, we're trying to align ourselves to external, but the external really, if they have what our ancestors and what we still believe in, it would be a much more peaceful world. You know, and aloha is the essence, and there are many more other concepts. But when I think of Auntie Nona, she was so mischievous. And so if you're going to tell her no, she's going to figure out 500 ways to go yes. And I saw her navigate Kamanamaikalani, and it was hysterical because she wouldn't take no for an answer. Well, she didn't wipe you out completely, but there are times when she just gave you the look and you better shut up, regardless of what pala you get. So we need that too, of the unconditional love that our kupuna had for each other.
Yeah, I agree. And there's a, you know, that's how she inspired me, right? Is that incredible, unwavering aloha. The kind, you know, when your grandma touches you and all the doubts you had in yourself. Wow. At the same time, though, I mean, fearless, totally fearless, courageous, and stand up. So I think we do have that. And yeah, I mean, if there's a way, like, as a collective whole, if we can take all the injustice that we've had and find strength in that.
I think you had
I
leadership.
just wanted to let everyone know that his book is out there. And it's 20% off today or something. Like $12. No, if you get it, you can sign it. I just went to go buy mine so he can sign it for me. Yeah.
Where is that?
It's right by, if you go straight out this way to the right, there's some books. It's kind
Hey, credit card.
Sorry, we
I
have
know you
one.
want to plug.
I'm sure they do.
This is the book to start with first. I read this one, I read Noah, Hawaiian, I read Zoya, Hawaiian. I wish this one came out before all.
Yeah.
Now, this one, it's a lot easier to flow with Zoya, flow with Silva. So, please get this one.
And it's on sale today, only today.
They're not related to me too, just so you guys know. Not that close.
Yeah, we don't know this guy.
And you
How
have,
did you make it a required textbook in the schools, especially in where I still advocate?
Oh, first teachers.
And sending resolutions to become bills in the legislature, even no evidence, no agreement, but it becomes a textbook. How does that process begin? You know?
shoot, other DOE people might have a better sense of it than me. Yeah, I mean, there are some teachers that I know are starting to use it now. And they say even for high school, the way that I wrote it, you can read a chapter, get the original source documents. I mean, so
Build the whole course.
yeah. But I'm all for that. Okay, well, any other manao? And I know we got plenty of things to do, but well, thank you so much, mahalo nui, for sharing this. Please sign in and do the eval sheet.
Who is your papa?
My father is Kapono.
I thought so.
Yeah.
I graduated.
Uy, ako Kiola. Oh, 69. Yeah.
Oh.